Sound check, sound check. Can you hear me, Brian?
Progress.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning and Transportation Commission's regular meeting for Wednesday, August 26th, 2026. Mr. Javera, could you call roll, please?
Yes. Chair Jane,
Here.
Vice Chair G, Commissioner Templeton, Commissioner Aiken, here. Commissioner Heckman, here. Commissioner James, here. For the record, we have quorum.
Do we have any agenda changes, additions, or deletions, Assistant Director Armour?
None tonight.
Thank you. So our first order of business is in-person public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any cards, Mr. Javera?
To the chair, we have not received any general public comment cards.
Great. Okay. On to city official reports then, Assistant Director Armour.
Great. Good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening. We will quickly go over upcoming meeting dates. We have published the recruitment for our vacant commissioner seat. The deadline for applications for that is September 2nd. You can find information online, but please spread the word. Your next meeting will be September 9th. We were trying to reschedule that because it conflicts with a special meeting of the council. However, council at their last meeting did ask us to return to you for discussion of one component of the accessory dwelling unit ordinance on separate sale of ADUs. So we will be bringing that to you because they specifically requested that it come back to the Planning and Transportation Commission for additional recommendations and then return to them before the end of the year. Then we have the Boards and Commissions recognition event on the 16th. And we have potentially 3 items for your September 30th meeting. We will confirm that as we get closer to the date, but we are looking at an ordinance to update the single family objective standards and the Senate Bill 9 regulations, because there was a temporary ordinance for that that would expire at the end of the year. So we're looking to finalize and update that. And then we have 2 potential transportation projects that may be coming to you that night: South Palo Alto Bike Ped Connectivity Project and the Bryant Street Bike Boulevard Lincoln Avenue Traffic Calming Project. Then on to the next slide, council dates that just occurred or are coming up. On August 17th, the City Council did approve the accessory dwelling units ordinance.
I think we're not on the next slide.
We will move to the next slide. There we go. August 17th, they did approve that. As I mentioned, that we will be returning to you on the one component of that ordinance that will be adopted at a later date. They also approved the housing project at 762 San Antonio. On the 9th, which is a special meeting on a Wednesday, they will be discussing the rezoning at 470 Olive Avenue. And then on the 14th, they are scheduled to consider the parking garage at 375 Hamilton Avenue. That's not come to the Planning and Transportation Commission recently, but the Planning Commission was part of discussions on that early on. And then the stream corridor protection ordinance. So that is the update for tonight. We don't have anyone from transportation joining us this evening, but they will at future meetings.
Does anyone have any questions for staff? All right, go ahead. Well, it looks like I've got Commissioner Aiken and then Heckman.
Hi, just a quick question about the September 30th agenda, the Lincoln Bryant traffic calming project. Will I need to recuse for that?
I will make sure that we get clarification on that one.
Thank you.
Commissioner Heckman.
It looks like council and PTC are meeting on September 9th.
Correct.
Do we know where are we going to move the city council to?
So city council will be in chambers and we will be in the community room just off of the lobby for our meeting. There will also potentially be logistics depending on the timing. Since we only have a single item, it may be that there's no conflict, but because we do have a project that went to the Planning and Transportation Commission, that's then being considered by council that night, we'll want to make sure that the liaison can come and join and answer questions from council if they have them. So depending on how long our meeting goes, we may take a 15-minute break to allow the liaison to join council and answer questions and then rejoin us. So we've got some backup plans for that as well in terms of logistics.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other question? Commissioner James.
It's about
This is not, I don't have a Mac on it. So I guess my question is similar to Commissioner Aikman. Is I lived at Lincoln and Bryan. I signed the petition before I was on PTC, but I know a lot about that corner, but you know, I guess the question is, do I need to recuse myself? I don't live there any longer.
Okay, I will be happy to look into
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Get clarification for you
Yeah.
prior to that meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that brings us to our first action item, or our only action item for tonight, which is a recommendation to the City Council on an ordinance amending Chapter 18.20 Office Research and Manufacturing districts of Title 18 of the Palo Alto Municipal Code to clarify that multiple family residential uses in the ROLME zone may be conditionally permitted. So could we start with a staff presentation for that?
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Joey Din here, Senior Planner with the Planning Division. This item is a city-initiated zoning text amendment concerning how, as you said, multifamily residential uses are treated in the ROLME zone district. I apologize in advance if my tongue gets twisted later on. Next slide, please. So staff is asking the Commission to recommend that the City Council amend Code Section 18.20.30, Table 1, to clarify that multifamily uses may be conditionally permitted in the ROLME zone properties. This is a zoning text amendment only. It doesn't approve any specific development or project. It doesn't change zoning map boundaries. It doesn't create a by right housing pathway, as a CUP would still be required. Next slide, please. So a little background, the housing element update, the last one, identified housing inventory, opportunity sites, and focus areas. And so the accompanying ordinance 5608 then amended zone districts and land use regulations to implement those housing element programs. These amendments expanded multifamily housing opportunities in the GM-RLM focus areas and also updated Section 18.20 Table 1. However, the existing CUP provisions for multifamily housing in ROLM and ROLME still remained in the following section 18.20.40, which is why staff is here before you tonight, as the current land use table therefore needs clarification. Next slide, please. Now, before I walk you through this slide, I did want to note there was one typographical error in the circulated staff report and the draft ordinance. There was a reference to code section 18.14 40B5, which should actually read section 18.20 40B5. That is the actual applicable ROLME provision. This is a citation correction, and so it does not change the overall proposed amendment, staff's analysis, or recommendation. Now, for Table 1. Table 1 groups ROLM and ROME together and lists multifamily housing as a CUP, and it includes footnote 1. That footnote 1, applies a limitation geographically tied to the GM ROM housing element focus area. Now, separately, as I mentioned before, the following section 18.20.40B5 speaks about a CUP pathway for multifamily development in the ROLME. subject to provisions and also the RM20 standards. Now, the proposed amendment clarifies the CUP pathway for RLME. The amendment doesn't change RLME development standards, and it doesn't predetermine any housing project to be appropriate on any specific property. It just preserves the city's ability to consider an application through the discretionary process. Next slide, please. So this is the map of the RLME properties citywide, which are shown as the red highlighted parcels. These are outside of the GM RLM housing element focus areas, which are shown as the green and the pink highlighted parcels. Additionally, many of the RLME properties are shown to be along East Bayshore Road and Gang Road, which is near the Baylands. Some, if not all of the properties are actually within the Baylands master plan area. But a little context on the Baylands master plan, it doesn't specifically prohibit residential use on privately owned lands. It instead kind of defers site-specific compatibility to be addressed through the CUP, any other entitlements such as site and design, any applicable CEQA, and conditions of review. Next slide, please. So to bring it back, in summary, the scope of the ordinance proposed, it clarifies just the RLME CUP pathway. It maintains that discretionary review, keeps the use, it requires use to meet the RM20 development standards and still requires project level findings. Again, it doesn't approve any specific housing project, create a by right path, change any zoning map boundaries, or remove CEQA review. So that brings us to staff's recommendation. Slide, please. Staff recommends that the PTC recommends City Council adopt the ordinance. So that concludes staff's presentation. And staff's available for any questions. Thank you.
So do we have any clarifying questions from the commission before we take public comment? Okay, I have one quick one. So are there any undeveloped parcels in the Baylands that fall in full or partially private ownership? Undeveloped ones.
We can take a look at the map
Okay.
as we proceed and get back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then are there any public comments, Mr. Trevera?
Yes, through Chair, there's one request to speak.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Let's go ahead with that.
Our first speaker is Shani. Shani, you may now speak.
Thank you. My name is Shani Kleinhaus. I speak for the Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance. I'm a resident and I'm a PRC commissioner. And I'm very disappointed that it did not come to the PRC. I think it should. I'm concerned about treating this simply as a technical correction. I'm also very concerned that the item about this not going to the PRC. This ordinance would establish that multifamily housing is a conditionally permitted use on every ROLME parcel, regardless of location. Some of these parcels were described as within and immediately adjacent to the Baylands, and staff acknowledged that there is environmental sensitivity here and potential impact to habitat, hydrology, views, and access. These are also all within sea level rise risk. So these parcels are outside of the housing element focus area, and these parcels are not selected as housing element opportunity sites, but this opportunity was opened down to multifamily housing. I understand the staff explanation that this was allowed before 2024. However, correcting an inconsistency does not require choosing the interpretation that allows housing in environmentally sensitive areas. And so potentially staff could identify or clarify that residential uses should not be in our RLME. I also question the CEQA exemption. Staff relies on future CUP and project-specific CEQA review, but we see a lot of changes in laws that keep changing it, so CEQA will not necessarily be required. And maybe this is the time that CEQA should be done before the ordinance is adopted. And so potentially state housing laws will mean that there'll be no protections for the wetlands in the future, or that the city will not be able to require protection for the wetlands in the future. So I urge you to continue this item. Ask staff and the city attorney to evaluate alternatives that protect the baylands and still maintain the city or meeting the city housing obligations. The question of where these might have impacts is important before deciding to go ahead with it. So, and again, I think the PRC should be required to review this and know which parcels would be impacted. Once we deliberately put regardless of location into our zoning code, it becomes a land use policy decision, and it includes lands that are extremely sensitive, and some may be underwater. We don't even know that. So please continue this item and get more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that it for public comment?
Yeah, there's no more requests to
Okay,
speak.
great. So with that, we bring it back to the commission for discussion and questions. Light it up, commissioners. Commissioner Heckman?
Thank you. So first of all, Mr. Din, welcome. Excellent, very clear report and presentation, and look forward to more of the same in the future. I am supportive here of the staff recommendation. I do view this as an unintended internal inconsistency in our code. Our code says, very clearly at section 1820.040 that multifamily development in the Rome E shall be permitted, subject to essentially CUP and development standards. So that's in our code, and the problem is in the table and in the note, really that flexibility was not picked up, and this amendment intends to create that inconsistency. So to my reading, the intent is to be able to consider housing in the Rome E, and this footnote clarifies that by removing this unintended obstacle. Now, whether multifamily housing is appropriate on any Rome E site, that is a very site-specific question. And our public speaker may be exactly right that there could be a presentation on a piece of property in the future where the city determines really no set of conditions can adequately mitigate the impact that a development of that site will have. But we're not there. And I don't think it's appropriate in the context of what we're being asked to do tonight to basically eliminate residential development from all Rome E sites. So I think that it's well explained in the staff report, and that's why I'm supportive of moving it on to council with a positive recommendation.
Commissioner James, and then Aiken.
I basically agree. I mean, I think the recommendation is consistent with what the intent of the city council was in 2024. And I also believe the proposed footnote, which, I find challenging to read on the first pass and understand. On the third attempt, I think it does capture and defines, where and how housing would be permitted and where it's discouraged, where it's allowed. So I feel like that's pretty straightforward. I do Shani's comments resonate with me. I think we all care deeply about that area. as Commissioner Heckman mentioned, this still allows for a case by case basis to reject something. I mean, if it has to have a conditional use permit, by definition, it's not guaranteed. So there's an out there, but I do wonder if there's some other path. I don't think that should slow this down, but I share those concerns of the caller, and I wonder if there are some things on a separate path that could be done through this commission or another commission to kind of address those larger environmental concerns. I don't have an answer to that, but I just share that sentiment.
Thank you. Mr. Aiken?
Largely, as will echo what's been said before. Welcome, Mr. Den. I hope we'll see you more in the future. Great report. Yes, I think the recommendation is precise, and as it restores the original intent, I'm inclined to support it. Since the CUP process is invoked, I hope that would be sufficient to deal with possible environmental consequences at particular sites. Thank you.
All right, so I have a question for Mr. Yang regarding the CUP process and state laws as they currently exist. As we know, the landscape of state laws has changed even since 2024. And certainly since the time the ROLM-E section of the ordinance that we looked at suggested that up to RM20 might be appropriate. So Mr. Yang, currently with our state laws, is the CUP process bulletproof? Meaning if a housing project were proposed, if Palo Alto determined that it was inappropriate for that area, would we be able to deny it?
So, there are findings that are required for the city to approve a CUP. But for housing projects that comply with all of our objective standards, the city is our discretion over that CUP would be limited by the Housing Accountability Act. So we would only be able to deny that CUP if there were generally either the project doesn't comply with our objective standards or there are significant adverse impacts on health and safety.
And health and safety would not necessarily include environmental impacts. Is that correct?
It's hard to make a sweeping statement about that, but we would largely be looking at. I can't make a generalized statement. I'm sorry.
Okay, well then maybe I should rephrase. Thus far, when we've seen projects where there's pretty big impacts that a layperson might view as a safety issue, for example, traffic in Barron Park for one project, we weren't really able to use that safety concern because there was no objective standard for the safety measure, correct? And so is it the same standard that projects would be held to here?
Yes, that's the same standard.
Okay, thank you. So based on that, I am a lot less comfortable with allowing the RM20 or allowing development there with the CUP. And the reason for it is because when we went through the housing element process, we as a city said we did not want development. We wanted to concentrate our development on our current side of 101, not on the Bayland side of 101. And with the current environment of state laws, if any project were to meet the objective standards, we would not be able to use the CUP process to stop that project, even if we thought it was not appropriate for the Baylands. Secondly, with additional state laws in place, such as state density bonus law, the density that we currently view as potentially appropriate at RM20 could be effectively doubled. And without understanding what Palo Alto, like my understanding is sort of the layperson's understanding of what Palo Alto wanted, both through the housing element process and by the CUP language that is vestigial in our code at this point or in conflict with the table. That environment doesn't exist anymore because of state law. And so I'm very concerned about essentially opening the door to dense development that is denser than what we intended, and it also would not be necessarily gated by a CUP process. So that's where I stand on it. I would want to continue the item so that we understand it a little more. And I didn't know if staff had any answer to the question about whether there's any privately owned undeveloped parcels.
So I think we do. It doesn't look like there are any parcels that are privately owned and undeveloped in that area. In addition, if I may add a little more context to your concerns about this opening the door to housing in this area, because the comprehensive plan land use designation for the area already mentions housing, providing that a CUP could be used to allow multifamily housing is not actually changing. It's not opening the door to housing in this location because the comprehensive plan already lists it. It really could be seen more as a way of allowing a process similar to what we have allowed along El Camino Real with the focus area, providing an alternative to just coming in with state law to do housing, but having a way for developers to work with the city to accommodate our concerns.
So I'm just going to ask a follow-up question of Councillor Yang regarding that. So if I understand correctly, then regardless of whether we have the CUP process or not, if a housing development were proposed that met the objective standards, then that would be allowed because of what's in our comprehensive plan? Because I reviewed the comprehensive plan language and it said it may be permitted at times or something to that effect.
Yeah, so that comprehensive plan language was obviously written quite a while ago, and before some of the more recent changes in state law. And so it doesn't offer us the type of clarity that would be most helpful. But I guess I would say that a developer could raise a reasonable argument that even today, based on the comprehensive plan, housing is allowed throughout the RLME.
So my recollection of that language that was added to almost every single area within the comp plan is that it was done sometime in the last 5 years while I was on this commission and as part of the housing element process. So does that mean that essentially any area where we said housing might be approved within the comp plan is now a place where we would have housing or we could have housing?
Yeah, so that language was not part of our housing element process. It was in our comp plan from 2017 or 16. But due to changes in state density bonus law since that time, there's an argument to be made that any place our comp plan says that housing may be allowed, that it must be.
Commissioner James?
Yes. So this was something I'm going to ask about later, but it seems relevant. On packet page 34 at the bottom, I was quite surprised under state density bonus law, because I'm kind of operating on this notion that, again, that health and safety and objective design standards are the two ways that we can help shape a project. And the last sentence there says, nonetheless, it remains possible for a density bonus applicant to waive the ODS as well. Am I reading that right? They can ask for that as a waiver, that the objective design standards go away.
So
we're only left with health and safety.
Right. So with the use of certain state laws, waivers can be used if standards prevent them from accomplishing the density that they're proposing. So yes, waivers and concessions do make it so that even with objective standards, we may not be able to enforce them all.
So, I mean, that seems relevant if we're talking about like how we could ensure that, you know, something that we kind of deem undesirable in the particular area is built if the objective design standards can be removed and the health and safety standards are not really applicable. Somebody help me out here. This seems tough. I mean, my take on this is I feel like there's a correction here that I think does feel like a technical correction, but I think there is also a legitimate concern about development in that sensitive area. So my inclination is like, can we make the correction, which seems to make the situation no worse, and it actually gives a pathway for us to provide or not provide a conditional use permit. So that just seems like some clarity that can't be bad. But I think, I would love for someone who is more senior and experienced than me to take a swing at like how is there another path that we can kind of address the the concerns about this habitat, and what would that be if it's not objective standards and it's not health and safety? I mean, I guess it could be objective standards if an applicant does not use state density law. So so I guess the question then it would be, is there an objective design standard that can be specific to that region?
There also is the environmental review, and depending on the particular situation, what's proposed and what review applies. But for example, impacts to sensitive species, which we have several in the Baylands, is the category of thing that in most cases would be part of the review of a proposed project to ensure that there weren't significant impacts through CEQA review. So we would anticipate doing that sort of review. There is, of course, in a number of different ways, as we're discussing now, state law has come in and said that there are certain things for housing that the state has deemed more important than the other controls and reviews that we have had. And so there's little for us to do in those cases. But providing pathways for developers to work with us is something that staff is actively pursuing so that we can have thoughtful development that does take those things into consideration.
And can I just follow up? So I know that in some situations, and I can't remember them encyclopedically, but CEQA is waived, but I think that's on infield development or what
Infill, yeah.
Infill. Sorry, there's a little COVID brain still going on here. I'm combining people's names and interesting things tonight, but so that's waived there, but it wouldn't necessarily be in this case under any of the new state laws.
So if they're in a situation like this, in most cases, we would be looking for a biological study to ensure that the development wasn't going to have impact on the protected species in the area. There are some state laws that are limiting the environmental review that we can do, but in most cases, we would be able to do that level of review to make sure that there were mitigation measures in place and other things to protect that. One of the other things that I know is often a concern with development, particularly in the Baylands, is the height of the buildings. One thing to be aware of, because this is in proximity to the airport, there are regulations there in terms of limitations to height. And I think that could very clearly be connected to health and safety because it's safety in relation to those airplanes. not a legal mind, I would defer the final determination on that to the attorneys. But there are certain things like that that would also come into play when looking at the design of a project.
Thank you.
Commissioner Heckman.
So our comprehensive plan says that housing is a permissible use on these Rome E properties. It doesn't, its map includes the Rome E properties. And our zoning cannot be inconsistent with our comp plan. So we cannot prohibit in our zoning something that's allowed in the comp plan. So it seems like what's being discussed here is really an amendment to the comp plan, which is not exactly what's on our agenda, but I think that this discussion is appropriate in the context of what is. And so and the sort of state it directly, the issue on the table is, should there be an amendment to the comp plan to prohibit residential development on the properties that are zoned ROLME, whatever that designation may be in the comp plan, so that we do not have this undesirable consequence of an applicant applying for a state law housing development that bypasses the CUP requirement, which is our environmental protection. And I think that's an appropriate question to ask the council, whether they have an appetite to delve into. I would imagine that to the extent there was a wrestling with this issue, it would have been wrestled with in the housing element process that we completed a couple of years ago, as we looked at the places where we thought it would be appropriate to put housing. But that was a big task, and this is a fine detail, and maybe that wasn't looked at. The same way we had this oversight in the conflicting zoning regulations. So I think it's a good message to send to the council. And there have been, the state law continues to evolve. And so maybe we want to include something in our recommendation that they consider that or the desirability of protecting this land better than it's currently protected through our comp plan.
Thank you, Commissioner Heckman. We're caught in a situation where if I felt like we could actually use our CUP process and actually guarantee that things would stay at the RM20 density, that it might be totally fine. But because of all the landslide of state laws that has come towards us, I don't feel comfortable doing that right now. We had one public comment tonight, and I think that had the headline been, see if we could allow housing in the Baylands master plan area at whatever the maximum density or height is that could be, then we might have gotten more public comment. So I do have a question for Councilor Yang again. What is the maximum height or density that would be allowed if all the state laws were stacked along with whatever regulations might be in place right now for airport safety?
So I don't know the exact limit on the airport side of things, but in terms of the maximum density, it could be in the case of a 100% affordable project or some other project that's basically a 100% affordable project. It could be up to 40 units per acre. Most private development is probably going to come in at around 25 units per acre using a the 20 to 25% density bonus. As far as height, there's technically not a limit, setting aside what the airport requirements may be. But practically at that 25 unit per acre density, you'd be looking at a townhome project along the lines of the Gang Road project.
Okay. So I don't see other lights here from my fellow commissioners, and the staff had proposed a recommendation as well as alternative actions. So we know what the staff recommendation is, and there's a couple alternative actions that we could choose on packet page 13. So we could recommend approval with specific modifications. We could recommend a denial and retain the existing language, or we could continue the item to a date uncertain. And where I stand on this is I'm not, initially I said, okay, I'd like to continue it, but I really think what we need is council direction on this. So we have 4 people here. We need a 4-person vote in order to pass something. Otherwise, it's going to be some sort of, I guess it'd be a split vote that we would pass on. So I'd be curious about what the other commissioners think about this.
I'm leaning towards the interpretation that Commissioner Heckman offered, which is practically, it seems that there is enough legal justification for an applicant to build in Rome E that even if we don't recommend this clarification, it could still happen. As Commissioner James said, it's hard to find fault with the clarification as an end in itself. So I'm still inclined to recommend the clarification. However, as Commissioner Heckman said, we do need to request that council consider whether a comp plan amendment is appropriate, given the risks that we've outlined here tonight. So my inclination would be to follow the staff recommendation with the additional condition as roughly outlined by Commissioner Heckman.
Okay, then would somebody like to make a motion? Would you like to make a motion, Commissioner Aiken?
Just wanted to hear if there were any other comments.
I don't see any other lights, so I have that advantage of no. Oh, here we go, Commissioner James.
Microphone.
I agree. I agree with that. I support making the change. I support finding a way, either I guess through the amendment, to flag to City Council that this is an area of concern. That when we're looking at it closely, that it needs some attention and some guidance from them.
Okay, motion.
Just a side comment first. We are trying to get these conditions incorporated into the motions to improve clarity of communication to council. So let's see what we can do with that explicitly. So I would move the staff recommendation with an additional recommendation to council that it consider modification to the comp plan that takes into account the effects of state law on the applicability of the CUP process.
Go ahead, Commissioner Heckman.
So as the motion doesn't yet have a second, I want to sort of kick around the condition because
Feel free.
I was thinking of a more focused condition that really directs the council to consider an amendment to the comp plan to remove housing as a potential use of properties
In the Baylands Master Plan.
well, zone ROLME. That's and so that's super and then because of the potential effects of projects brought under state law.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable approach. I strongly suspect that after council has reviewed the arguments we've had here tonight, they may realize that something beyond Rome E is needed. So that's why I phrased it as I did. But I'm content to go along with the consensus of the commission.
I did hear the chair mention the Baylands master plan. Is that, and I'm not stuck on Rome E necessarily.
Well, I would say that we should be as specific as we can because we know Rolme is an area. So I think we should name that. And then we could, to make room for the broader concern that Commissioner Aiken had, we could say Rolme E and any other areas as maybe appropriate. Right.
Other Bayside areas? Is that what we're?
Sure, Bayside areas.
Did you want to do Bayside areas or did you want to designate by zoning?
Whatever your pleasure is.
Yeah, I could see the same sort of problem arising in the foothills.
Exactly. I think
yeah.
Environmentally sensitive areas then.
Yeah, I was almost going to go there, but I wondered if that was too broad.
Well, I can't predict how the council will receive this, but I feel like the larger the task we put before them, the less likely they are to be willing to tackle it. And so maybe if you want to make a bulkhead of this Rome E, that might stir their appetite in if they would deign to start looking at that as they're discussing it. Well, right next door to this piece is a Rome, not E. And what about that? And so it may lead there, but I'm just afraid if we say, consider making all environmentally sensitive parcels in the city of Palo Alto not available for housing, they'll just say, yeah, we're not doing that.
So how about at minimum Rome E?
Sold. Well, it's some. Yeah.
So in that version, I will second.
Okay, but so let's try and restate that one more time, please, Commissioner Aiken.
Yeah, in fact, that was just what I was about to ask, whether you had captured that in a sufficiently clear fashion, or do we need to try again?
If you would like, I can try and restate it. What I heard was a recommendation to forward the staff recommendation to council for approval of the ordinance with an additional recommendation that the council consider
Amendment to the comp plan.
Future amendment to the comp plan to remove housing as a potential use from properties at a minimum in the ROLME district because of potential effects of projects brought under state law.
That captures what I would like to say.
And we've got the second, correct, Commissioner?
Yeah, I think that's an accurate summary. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion, commissioners? Could you please call the vote, Mr. Tavera?
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Commissioner James,
Yes.
Commissioner Aiken,
Yes.
Chair Chang,
I'm going to be the pain in the butt here as usual and say no.
motion carries 3-1.
No. So this is the question. Do we need 4 people?
No, majority of those present is sufficient.
Okay, great. So then I guess I would like to speak to my no vote. Again, because I just want to make sure that we have this issue flagged to City Council. I think it's a pretty urgent issue. that we need to protect our environmentally sensitive areas. I don't think that the left hand is talking to the right in Sacramento when they talk about environmental concerns and then have housing laws that override the local environmental concerns. And I think they're very real here. In addition, with the housing element, we specifically didn't want and did not choose to have housing element opportunity sites east of 101, both because of the environmental sensitivity and because of very real risk with sea level rise and climate change. So I kind of question the housing there, unless we are able to actually enforce some rules, which for the most part we're not able to with state laws. So, and I just wanted to thank my fellow commissioners. I'm sort of doing the vote just to flag this for concern because I think it's a very significant concern. Thank you. Okay, with that, we go on to the next item, which is a study session. So it's a study session on the South of Forest area, also called SOFA, Coordinated Area Plan, Objective Design Standard Approach. Could we start with the staff presentation, please?
Yes, we have project planner Leslie Velasquez joining us online, so she'll be providing the staff presentation. Plus, we have additional staff and consultants here to support the discussion and any questions you may have. Go ahead.
Hi, y'all. Good evening. My name is Leslie Velasquez. Tonight, I will be presenting on the South of Forest Area Coordinated Area Plans Objective Design Standards Project. Alessandra Lundin, one of the consultants on this project, is also here to answer any questions you might have. Next slide, please. This project is intended to create objective design standards for the SOFA 1 and SOFA 2 coordinated area plans in order to fulfill Housing Element Program 3.7. For some background, the SOFA plans cover a roughly 9-block area near downtown and have 3 different types of regulatory content: review procedures, development standards, and design guidelines. Currently, the SOFA plans only provide a discretionary review process. With new state housing laws, local agencies cannot enforce non-objective design standards for housing development. Additionally, while there was substantial development in the SOFA area after the plans were initially passed, development in the SOFA area has slowed in recent years. This project intends to address new state laws and the lack of recent development in the SOFA area by creating objective design standards to enable streamlined and ministerial review processes in the SOFA area. Next slide, please. The goal of today's meeting is for the PCC to review Attachment A and provide feedback on the project team's recommended approaches to developing objective design standards in the SOFA area. There are 3 core decision areas included in the memo: review procedures, which includes historic review, where the new SOFA objective design standards will be located, and outdated references and state law conflicts. Next slide, please. For your reference, here is the project timeline. We have completed the initial analysis phase and approach memo, and tonight is the first PTC meeting. After this meeting, our next steps are to begin drafting the SOFA objective design standards. After we have a draft, we plan to come back to the PTC and ARB for feedback. We anticipate that this project will be completed with adoption hearings in Q1 of 2027. Next slide, please. The first area where we are looking for feedback is review procedures. As previously mentioned, the SOFA plans currently only offer discretionary review. The project team recommends that SOFA align with the city's existing 3-track review process. With this strategy, the 3 tracks in the SOFA area will include Track 1, fully discretionary review, Track 2, streamlined review, and Track 3, ministerial or by right review. Additionally, existing subjective design guidelines in the SOFA plans will be used to guide discretionary review. Next slide, please. Regarding historic review, the project team recommends that SOFA historic review more closely align with citywide historic review processes. Fold SOFA 2's separate historic resources list into the citywide inventory, and remove the potential historic resources list, which is consistent with previous City Council direction on the citywide potential historic list. However, we recommend that we keep SOFA's demolition protection policies. Next slide, please. The second topic we request feedback on is the location of the new SOFA objective design standards. The project team recommends the creation of a new chapter in Title 18 of the Municipal Code to house the new SOFA objective design standards. The benefit of this strategy is that applicants for streamlined and ministerial projects can locate all applicable standards in a single document. Additionally, we plan to reference citywide standards where applicable and translate existing SOFA design and development standards, only altering these where they contain subjective language. The approach of creating a new chapter in the code is also consistent with the approach used for the North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan project. Next slide, please. With this approach, projects with discretionary review under Track 1 would work from the SOFA plan documents, and projects with streamlined or ministerial review, Tracks 2 and 3, would work from the new Title 18 chapter. Next slide, please. The last topic we would like feedback on is conflicts and outdated content. Both SOFA plans have provisions that are outdated or superseded by state law, for example, with regard to state ADU law. Additionally, both SOFA plans refer to outdated content, such as older comprehensive plans. To address this, the project team recommends the addition of a note to the SOFA plans that states that where SOFA policies conflict with state law prevails. Additionally, the project team will review any outdated references with the city attorney and determine the best course of action for each. Next slide, please. To summarize, the project team would like feedback on the following recommendations. Review procedures, where we recommend that we align SOFA with the citywide 3-track review process and keep guidelines for discretionary review and objective design standards for streamlined and ministerial review. Historic review, where we recommend to align to Chapter 16.49, fold SOFA 2's list into the citywide inventory, and retain SOFA 2's stronger demolition protections. And with regards to the objective design standards location, we recommend a new standalone Title 18 chapter referencing existing citywide standards and all SOFA objective development and design standards in one place. And lastly, with regards to conflicts and outdated content, we recommend that we resolve outdated references with the city attorney and add a note that says that state law prevails in case of conflicts. We also welcome any PTC feedback on any other items that are not listed here. Next slide, please. Thank you, and I'm available for any comments or questions along with Alessandra Lundin, our project consultant.
Thank you, Ms. Velasquez. All right, do we have clarifying questions from the commission before we take public comment? No, okay, Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. Just one, and it's pretty quick. Can you pull back up the last slide, slide 10? I just wanted a clarification on what I think is the last bullet point. Right. So add a note that state law prevails in case of conflicts. Is that a note in the plan or a note in the zoning ordinance?
I think that our idea was in the plans.
To the SOFA.
Okay, both,
Document.
yeah, okay. And to do that, doesn't that take some kind of simple amendment?
Correct.
Okay, all right, so that's contemplated in the staff recommendation.
Correct.
Great, thanks.
Additional clarifying questions, commissioners? All right, are there any public comments? Mr. Tavera?
The chair, we actually do have one spokesperson on behalf of a group
Okay.
and then an individual speaker.
One individual speaker?
One individual speaker and then a group.
Okay, let's just go with the usual time limit
Okay.
then.
Then our first speaker is Doran N, speaking on behalf of 6.
Good evening, Chair Cheng and the Commission. My name is Doron Neumann and I live at 707 Bryan Street in the south of Forest area. I live in Palo Alto for almost 25 years. My wife and I raised our kids here. They went to school here. My mother-in-law lived here for many years. My sister-in-law and other members of the family live here as well. So tonight, discussion is very personal to me. We choose Palo Alto because of the kind of community it's offers. We value the walkability and the mature trees, the scale of the neighborhood, the history, and the sense of community. And I want to be clear, very clear about something. I support housing. I support development. I understand that Palo Alto must grow and change, and that more people should have opportunity to live here. But growth should be responsible and balanced. New housing and protecting the quality of life of existing residents should be not treated as opposing goals. Good planning should accomplish both. That is why I believe tonight's discussion about SOFA objective design standard is so important. This is bigger than any one project. The standard developed today will influence projects that have not been proposed yet, and they will determine how the future development interact with the people, homes, street, trees, and building already here. I reviewed the staff report and the proposed approach. As I understand it, many of the existing SOFA development requirements are already objective, including standard addressing matters such as height, FAR, setbacks, lot coverage, parking, and density. Other part of SOFA plan rely on more objective design principle. The challenge now is to create objective and measurable standards that operate within the current legal framework while preserving the important SOFA planning principle, whatever the city retain an authority to do so. I think that distinction is extremely important. Making a standard objective should not mean abandoning the physical planning problem and that the original guidelines was intended to address. If a concept such as neighborhood contest and agricultural compatibility are too subjective to apply to certain housing project, then the question should be, what physical elements those behind those concepts can translate into clear and measurable standards? Building mass can be measured, setbacks and step-backs can be measured, height standards can be measured, daylight plans can be measured. The relationship between window, balconies, terrace, parking structure, landscaping, and neighborhood properties can be addressed through objective design requirement where legally appropriate. Those details matter because people live on the other side of those property lines. When a much larger building is constructed next to existing resident building, the transition between those buildings matter. Daylight matter, privacy matter, mature trees matter. The treatment of above-grade parking structure facing neighborhoods home matter. Those are not an argument against housing. Those are questions of how we build housing responsible. SOPA already has clear objective protection that remains legally applicable. I ask that they preserve rather than weaken simple as part of the process. The process development at 334 Avenue has made those issues very real for many of us who live in SOFA. I understand that tonight is not another hearing about 332 Forest, and I'm not asking you to make a decision based on it. I mention it for different reason. It demonstrates why objective standards matter. When we see the real proposal next to existing home, concepts such as messing, transition, daylight, privacy, landscaping, and parking structure are no longer abstract planning terms. We see how design decisions affect people who already live there. That experience should help inform the standards we establish for future projects. So I respectfully ask the Commission to focus on 4 things. First, preserve SOFA specific objective standards that remain valid and appropriate. SOFA is not a simple another generic zoning district. It was planned for as an area, and some of its standards reflect specific relationship between different building types and residential areas. Where existing citywide standards equitably address those conditions, use them. Where SOFA present different conditions, examine whatever SOFA specific objective standard is appropriate and legally permissible. Second, pay particular attention to the transition between building and substantial different scales. As density increases, this becomes more important. Height transition, daylight plan, setback, step back, building mass, privacy, landscaping, and the treatment of parking structure all influence whether higher density development fits responsible next to existing residents. Third, Make the system transparent. Residents should be able to understand what standards apply. Applicants should know what standards apply. The distinction between the different review tracks should be understandable without requiring someone to become a land use expert. Residents should be able to see clearly what existing SOFA protection are being retained, what is being changed, and what being removed, and why. If the objective standards are placed in a new chapter of Title 18, make the cross-reference from SOFA plans clear so people know exactly where to find the controlling requirements. And fourth, where existing SOFA provisions are no longer applicable because the state law identified those provisions as specifically as possible. Tell the public what remains, tell us what has changed, tell us what has been replaced by objective standards, what clarity will help resident, applicant, staff, and future commission. I also ask you to remember something very simple that you do this work. People already live in SOFA area, are part of the future of SOFA as well. We should welcome new residents. We should build more housing. Be responsible planning. Also consider the people who have invested their life in those neighborhoods and who will live beside the development and those standards shape. Those interests do not have a conflict. The goal should be balanced development that adds housing while creating building and neighborhoods where both existing and future residents can live well. The original SOFA plan comes from community plan process intended to accommodate development while creating a walkable and livable part of Palo Alto. The legal environment has changed. The responsibility to plan carefully is not. The standard you develop now will affect what this neighborhood look and feel like in 10, 20, 30, and 40 years from today. So please use this opportunity carefully. Make the standards objective, make them measurable, make them transparent, preserve meaningful SOFA-specific protection where they remain legally appropriate. And before treating this existing design principle as unenforceable guidance, determine whatever the physical issue and the address can be translated into a clear, measurable, objective standards. Where the city still has distraction in developing objective standards, use it thoughtfully to achieve responsible and balanced development. Your decision will shape SOFA for decades. Please make sure the decision protect what works, correct what does not, and create a clear standard for responsible, balanced development. The people who live here today and the people who will live here in the future deserve nothing less. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Utsav G. Utsav, you may now speak.
Good evening, Chair Chang and Commissioners. I'm Utsav Gupta for the University South and Professorville Neighborhood Association. I also serve on the Utilities Advisory Commission, and I am not speaking in that capacity. Thank you, and thank you to staff. We support creating strong objective standards for SOFA. We think this project can leave the neighborhood better protected, and we'd like to help. I have 3 requests I will speak to here, with a detailed set of questions in the letter I submitted earlier today. First, on the open space record. Attachment A, Table 2, says SOFA 2 has no private or common open space requirement. Could you please ask staff to double check that one? In the RT35 and RT50 districts, the plan says shall provide 3 times. And Appendix G3 sets numbers for RM30, which are 30% of the lot for common open space, 50 square feet for a balcony, 100 square feet for a patio or yard, at least 8 feet at its narrowest. We'd hate to see these requirements dropped by accident. Second, many of the requirements in the SOFA plan can indeed be made objective, and we should preserve as much of that as possible. I'll use the daylight plane as an example. The daylight planes put the SOFA plan transition into numbers. In SOFA 1's AMF district, the side plane starts 12 feet above the side lot line. The rear plane starts 12 feet above the rear setback line, and both rise at 60 degrees. And so these are already objective numbers, which makes them worth keeping. Table 2 says, and I'll quote it, recommend keeping as is. But section 3.1 says those standards may warrant review. If you could please ask staff which of those is the direction, and whether keeping as is rules out a general relaxation of these requirements. But again, this is just one example. Our hope is that this project makes the standards we have currently measurable without loosening them. Third, and most importantly, staff says they'll compile a list of outdated and superseded provisions. Please consider having that list published as a red line against both of the plans, with the reason for each change enumerated and brought back to you as its own item. Regarding the process, we think it could use much more engagement with the community. Currently, the report only names their webpage. We asked for a workshop in the neighborhood, a mailed notice, and at least 30 days on the draft, and hopefully more. And if staff would like any help running any of this, our neighborhood association stands ready. As mentioned earlier, we have sent a detailed letter with several questions. Thank you again for your time and your service.
And to the chair, this concludes public comment.
Thank you very much. All right, commissioners, let's have more questions and discussion.
Chair, how do you want to run the discussion?
So first, why don't we just see if there's broad questions after what was, after the public comment. And then after that, I was hoping that staff could put up that last slide, I think slide 10. And then maybe we could quickly just go 1, 2, 3, 4, and we can just raise our hands if there's something that we want to discuss, because there may be things of those 4 areas that were highlighted here, with the 4 bullet points. There may be some that we don't really need to discuss, and that way we can just skip them. Okay, so but first let's just see if there's more questions for staff broadly. Commissioner Aiken, then Heckman.
A couple of people have touched on this. Would you say that it's an explicit goal of the team to preserve all existing SOFA standards, objective standards, where they do not conflict with state law?
Yes.
You think it's worth stating that explicitly?
We have now stated that.
I meant in the document.
So yes, the intent that is the goal of this project, is to make as many things objective as possible. And I actually will hand off to our consultant to introduce herself and provide some more context.
Hello, Alessandra Lundin. Nice to meet you all. So just to provide a little bit more detail on that, as some of the members of the community mentioned, there are already a number of objective standards in the SOFA plan. So they're all the development standards, which you would expect to be objective already: setbacks, heights, etc. And we are not planning on changing any of those. They will stay as is. So mainly this project is covering those design guidelines that are in the plan. There's a section in SOFA 2, they're all consolidated in one place in one section. It says design guidelines for private development. Those are the guidelines that we're going to try to make objective as much as we can. It's about 5 pages long. SOFA 1 has very similar guidelines. It's just that they, instead of being consolidated in one place, they're kind of scattered and repeated by district. So this is a chance to also kind of clean that up by putting them all in one place consistently.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a very conscientious effort, and it shows in the document so far. I just wanted to make sure that people were reassured that that is an explicit intent.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Aiken. Commissioner Heckman?
Commissioner Aiken asked my question.
All right, I have a quick question for staff. Could you put up slide 10? Okay, so there's that 3rd bullet that says ODS location, objective design standards location. And then in the discussion, Ms. Velasquez had said, okay, these are the advantages of this. Were there any disadvantages that we should be aware of? Any downsides?
Ms. Valetzkas, I don't know if you've got any points, but I think in general, staff does not
It's not a
see
trick
any.
question. I just
Yeah,
wanted to make sure.
There were a number of different ways this could be implemented, and, you know, several of them are quite valid. This is the staff's recommendation. We don't see any downside to this.
Okay, great. Thank you. I don't see other lights here for just overall questions. So why don't we just go through the bullets and just, I'm going to just ask if you could just raise your hand if you want to discuss that further, or if you agree with the staff recommendation, then we'll just don't say anything and then we'll be fine. Okay, so Commissioner Aiken?
Yeah, just briefly, the alignment with other citywide procedures. I like the approach you've taken, and I was particularly interested to note the alignment with NVCAP processes. So that struck a chord for me.
Okay. So with respect to review procedures, is there anything specific that somebody would like to discuss about that? And just wave your hand at me so I know. So review, I'll just read it out loud for the public too. So review procedures, align SOFA with a citywide 3-track review, keep guidelines for discretionary review, and then objective design standards for streamlined ministerial review. So I at least have a little bit that I would want to discuss about that one. Just some questions and clarification. So we'll discuss that one. How about historic review? I also have questions about that one. Okay. And then what about the ODS location? Nobody, I think that one's, we agree with the staff recommendation based on the lack of hands up here. Conflicts and outdated content. Any discussion there? Yes.
It'll be brief, but yeah.
Okay, great. So 1 out of 4 down. That's good.
And
All right.
if I may, we
Yep.
do also have that note at the end. If there are any other topics beyond the ones identified by staff, we're happy to discuss any other components.
Okay, I'll just say, I did have one quick additional thing, which was the public outreach that I would want to discuss, as an additional item. Okay, so we'll start with the review procedures. Should we go back to that section of the staff presentation? That'd be helpful, commissioners? All right, I know I have a question to ask. Does anybody else have anything? No? Okay, so my question was around so my understanding is that SOFA has their own process where there's a joint ARB and HRB meeting. And I don't think I understand all of this very clearly. Does that only come into play when there is a historic resource in play, or does it happen all the time?
I will start by saying it isn't necessarily a joint meeting. It's joint review. It's review by both boards. And then if we want to add any additional detail to that.
Yes.
Triggers.
Yeah, it's, so as Jennifer mentioned, it's not necessarily a joint meeting, but it is review by both. And SOFA 1 does require review by both for all projects, not just historic resources, which is different from how the city handles historic resource review in SOFA 2, interestingly, and other areas citywide. So SOFA 2 did not have that distinction.
Would staff or our consultant have any idea why there is that distinction between SOFA 1 and SOFA 2?
I think we weren't able to find any historic information on why that was different, right?
Yeah, we looked into that issue to see if there was like a specific, basis referenced in the record about that component, but weren't able to locate anything specific that would indicate, why it was different for those two components of the area plan that were adopted 2 years apart.
Okay, Well, then I guess my opinion on that one is it seems to make sense to have, if there's no rationale for the difference, then it seems that we should use the same for them. And if there's no real clear rationale for the difference between SOFA and the rest of the city, then yeah, it makes sense to rationalize that. The one question I had was, so when we have the streamlined review, the track 2 process for the city, my understanding is that there's one like optional meeting with the ARB. Is that correct?
Yes, the streamlined architectural review process is just a single study session with the ARB.
Okay. And then the follow-on question to that is, if there is a historic resource in question, then does that automatically go before the HRB, or like, you know, I'm just kind of wondering how a historic resource would interact with the 3 tracks that we have right now.
So yes, if it was if there was a designated site that would involve review by the HRB, accepting some minor things, but if it's a new development, for example, would go to HRB. There are some.
But if it were a historic resource, could it even be a new development?
Probably not, unless they got demolition, which would go to the HRB for review. Correct.
Okay, so for historic resources anywhere in the city and in SOFA, if SOFA is aligned with the city, those would be evaluated by the HRB at some point.
Correct.
Okay, then I think I'm comfortable with this, since it sounds like, I mean, I guess my one other question was this unique thing for SOFA, which is the ARB review and the HRB review, even if it's not historic property. What was the rationale for that? Because I think that sounds like what we would be getting rid of, right? That's materially different.
Thank you. That is the difference, is we wouldn't be requiring HRB review for non-historic resources. I mean, that's not required for non-historic resources anywhere else, so.
May I step in a second?
Yes, please.
You need to be aware that districts as a whole can be historic resources, not just individual parcels and projects. So it's quite likely, my guess is that it was quite likely that that was the rationale for requiring the HRB to be involved.
Do we know if SOFA's, like SOFA 1 or whichever one it was, is a historic resource as a whole?
It is not one of the city's historic districts.
Okay, well, this is all good information. I'm glad I asked the questions. But with that, I think I would support the staff recommendation. Anybody else? Oh, yes, Commissioner Aiken.
No, mine's goes light.
Okay. Commissioner Heckman.
Thanks. I'm really fine with the review procedure, but I just wanted to make some overall comments about this effort. So, you know, we have SOFA 1 and SOFA 2. They were a labor of love for a lot of people 20 plus years ago. And the legal landscape has changed quite a bit since then, in many ways that none of the people involved in that process could have imagined, and none of the city staff realistically could have imagined either. But it's happened. And my impression of the city's effort here, city staff's effort, is to retain as much of SOFA 1 as we legally can, and to translate it into a language that complies with state law, where the language chosen back in the early 2000s didn't. And to me, that spirit comes out in the staff report. Some of the comments from the neighbors that I've reviewed, I feel like they didn't they're fearful, right? They they have these twins that they conceived 20 years ago, and they're afraid somebody's going to alter them in ways that they don't like. And it's a reasonable concern, and I think it's excellent that you're voicing it up front. This is a study session, so you've seen the schedule, and there's a lot of work that staff's going to do. We received a letter this afternoon from one of our speakers, Mr. Gupta, and and he referenced it in his remarks, and he mentioned that there were several questions in it. There were 42 questions in it. And it had, I think, 9 separate points. It was very well written, and there was a lot to think about in there, but it didn't come in until 4:03 this afternoon. And when we had 2 weeks ago, Project on Forest, he wrote on behalf of this organization, a letter that didn't come in until 3:20. Again, lengthy letter, a lot of great content. We want feedback from the people who care about our neighborhoods. And so I appreciate Mr. Gupta taking the time working with his organization to put these things together and get them to us. I would encourage you in the future, if it's at all possible, and I know it's a challenge because the staff report doesn't come out until Wednesday night, and we have lives. If you can get it to us a day earlier, then the commissioners here give us a little time to digest it and maybe find more of your points that we can dialogue, sitting here with staff. But again, I'm appreciative of the effort, and staff has that letter now, and I know, like with all the public comments, they take them seriously, and they'll look through those items as they are taking the next steps to create this new ordinance that will capture the parts of the 2 SOFA plans that need to have this treatment. So those are my comments on that. Overall, I'm supportive of staff's direction on all 3 of the bullets, and I did, when we get to it, I just had a quick comment on that last bullet on sheet 10, slide 10.
Okay, so the second bullet is, I don't see any more lights on this one, right? Okay, so then on the second bullet had to do with the historical resources recommendations. Can we pull that up, please? So I just wanted to ask, I'm very supportive of the retention of SOFA 2 stronger demolition protections. I had a question regarding the potentially eligible list for SOFA 2. I was wondering if staff could give a little bit more context about how that list was created, if it was created at the same time as the whole city's potentially eligible list, or if there was a different process.
Yes, we can confirm it was the same process. It was basically a windshield survey driving by. And so similar to what the council has already done for the citywide list, we are recommending that for these ones that are considered just potentially eligible based on that windshield survey, no longer be listed here unless, further study was done on it.
Okay, so I spoke to a member of the HRB because there was this chair, vice chair meeting. And what I had learned is that the potential list was a combination of both a windshield survey as well as an additional investigation to determine if some of those sites, like a little bit more research to determine if the sites could potentially be eligible for California or local registers. But that said, if that was the city count, like the SOFA 2 list then of potential sites should have also all been included on the citywide list. Is that correct?
I believe so. I'm looking to other staff just in case they have anything to add.
Yeah, I think that's my understanding is if it was determined that they should be added from, if the question is, should they have been taken from the potential list and sort of elevated to the citywide list? Is that
No,
you're
my
asking, or-
question is, so my understanding is that council made a decision with respect to what should be done with the citywide list. And if the SOFA 2 list is of potential historical resources, is a clear subset of the citywide list, then it makes perfect sense for city council's determination for the citywide potential list to apply to the SOFA 2 list as well.
Correct.
Correct.
It just wasn't part of that discussion at that time. We've now identified that there's this separate list in this document,
but
it wasn't discussed at that time.
But it's vestigial, correct? In other words, those properties were already a subset of the list that.
I believe so. We can confirm
Yeah,
and would confirm before we brought this to you for a recommendation.
Okay, so that's just my, dotting the i's and crossing the t's things. Please confirm that before we go forward, because if city council made the decision but didn't realize that there's this other list that was potentially created in a different process, then I wouldn't want to lose that information.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing that we can also confirm is that at least a subset of the potentially historic properties, some of them have already been determined not to be historic since the plan was adopted.
In which case we should update that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then my other question with respect to folding the historic resources into the citywide list, has the examination been done to show that there is no overlap between the two right now, or is there some strange partial overlap, or?
There is overlap. There may be inconsistencies. So we would work to identify that. We want to make sure that anything that is listed in SOFA as historic, that does get captured in the citywide list so that people are finding it in one location.
Okay. And then for the citywide list, my understanding is that there's 4 different levels of historic resource level, 4 different levels. And so how would we decide which level it would go into?
So properties are identified at 4 different levels in terms of what type of historic review is required. However, there is also this 5th category that were identified through this survey, but aren't actually determined to be historic, just potentially historic because, well, they're old enough and maybe. And so that 5th category is what the city council determined. Let's not have that as a listing because that's causing difficulties for property owners. And there isn't actually any evidence that they actually are historic. Whereas those that are actually categorized 1 through 4, there are processes that are defined in our code in terms of what level of review and what modifications can be allowed. And so those would be consistent SOFA and beyond. We will make sure that we ensure that it gets consolidated into a single list.
So I understand that, but are the historic resources on the SOFA historic resources, not the potential one, but the actual historic resources, are those already classified into level 1, 2, 3, and 4? And if not, how are they going to be ported over into the main city list and then subdivided into levels 1, 2, 3, and 4?
If they are designated levels 1, 2, 3, or 4,
then it's easy. Yes.
Then it would be transferred. If there are some that we identify that are listed as historic but don't have a category, then we will make sure that we're taking that through the proper process to designate them.
Okay, and does that go through the HRB then?
It would.
Okay. then I'm very supportive of this recommendation. Okay. So we're going to skip the ODS location because we all agreed with the staff recommendation on that. And then there was at least one comment on the fourth bullet, which is conflicts and outdated content. I think that was Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. So to make SOFA 1 and SOFA 2 read entirely consistent with state law as it exists today would be this massive amendment. And it's, as staff says in the staff report, that's beyond the scope of what we're doing here. And I think that's a wise deployment of staff resources. What we're the approach taken is the SOFAs say what they say, but we're going to have this new zoning ordinance that applies in instances of inconsistency. And that's how we're going to capture the changes that have happened in law, both state and local, since the early 2000s. And I really like that approach. This last bullet point talks about notifying the public in the plans that we've done this. And it's reminding me of what I think was a conversation we had to PTC on the early draft of the Cubberley Master Plan, where a lot of the members of the public were expressing great fear that what they were seeing was a near final product. But in that early draft, there was language that said, this is, a very rough draft, the phasing may be different. And it was a very useful language, but it was buried on like page 49. And so one of the PTC's recommendations was, let's put that language in bold. You keep it on 49, but I want to put it at the front end and again at the back end. I want everybody to know, because what's going to happen with this is going to, this will go forward and hopefully on your time frame, and we're going to end up with this new ordinance. People are going to go read SOFA, and they're going to see language that doesn't apply anymore, and they're going to start to invest mentally in that language. And so as you look at the note, I'd like staff to think about making it two things. One, make it a roadmap. Don't just say that, these provisions apply unless state law conflicts. Say, this document was drafted in the early 2000s, state law has changed. And the city has, rectified that with this new ordinance, and you'll name the ordinance. And where there's an inconsistency between this document you're reading and that ordinance controls. And I would put that at the front. I would put that at the back, depending upon how the plans are. There might be a development standard section in one or both of them. Put it at the front of that. Just think about the location, because ultimately you don't want people showing up at meetings in the future and pointing to language that they think applies when it doesn't, because we haven't told them clearly enough it doesn't. So just that's worth some special thought. What will be a minor amendment to each plan to how to do the noticing. That's it. Overall, I think it's great. I'm looking forward to the process unfolding, and for the public in that area to see how, as we start to see drafts, how staff is protecting the plan that they have an emotional investment in.
Commissioner James, then Aiken.
I just want to add, there's been a lot of eloquence tonight, and I can't do better than that, but I'll add my support of the process, and in particular, I think, because with all the state laws that are taking so much control away from us, I know that having these recommendations become objective design standards is really the only way we have to kind of shape these housing projects and developments to our liking. So I see that as sort of a great step forward, a necessary one. It will not change the fact that this neighborhood is located close to public transportation and state law. That's the big thing here that's sort of beyond our control. But this is the best control that we have, I think, is coming in. Particularly I'm particularly excited about the revisions to take the standards and make them or recommendations and make them objective design standards. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, so that's what I have to say.
Commissioner Aiken?
Thank you, Chair. So I think you've got a great process outlined here. For the conflicts and outdated content in particular, there is a tremendous amount of detail work to do. And I think Mr. Gupta's written letter that we received late today is should provide everyone some great insight at just how much of that work there is to do. So while I support the direction that you're taking, I do wonder if the suggestion to have a redlined summary of how things developed from the original SOFA 1 and 2 caps to the new version, particularly the material in Title 18. I do wonder if that's worth doing. If you have the resources to do it, I think it would be worthwhile as a way to maintain connection with the rest of the community. And certainly a good thing to have if you do decide to pursue more community outreach. Thank you. That was it.
Great. So then I think that takes us to, feedback on additional items. And I think mine were going to be very in line with what Commissioner Aiken said. Definitely take Mr. Gupta's letter and go through that line by line, because there's a lot of really good specific points and might have caught some inconsistencies and errors. Ms. Velasquez, could you pull up the slide about the timeline?
Yes, we'll get that shared in a moment.
Or Sam, Mr. Tavera. So I think it might be wise just to notice all the meetings, the public meetings that are going to happen, at least there's a neighborhood group, and it may make sense to let them know.
We do expect for the hearings where we're looking for a recommendation from the ARB or PTC to do noticing.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I think then that's about it. There were some really good points that Mr. Gupta made about open space and open space and daylight flame that I thought were good. But I think that staff's approach with respect to SB 79 and how that's going to impact everything was really is very appropriate. So we don't know what our transit-oriented development plan is going to look like, but I like staff's plan to plan for either the 50% or the 100% of SB 79, because that way we can parallel process all of those efforts. Any other comments? Did staff get what they need from us regarding the study session?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. And thank you for all the work. We actually really appreciate all the tables. They were very easy to read. So thank you. All right. So with that, we move on to commissioner questions, comments, announcements, or future meetings and agendas. I've got something, but I don't know if anybody else does. Okay. So we had the mayor and vice mayor's chair and vice chair meeting of all the boards and commissions yesterday. And there are a couple things that I think my fellow commissioners will be really pleased to hear about. So we on the PTC no longer have a city council liaison. Many of the other boards and commissions, if not all of them, have a city council liaison who sometimes attends their meetings, sometimes listens in, or at the very minimum is a point person to whom that board and commission can go with updates or will kind of be designated to ask the commission for updates. And so council is going to think about giving us a liaison again. That person may not attend all our meetings, but at least then it's a person who we know we can check in with. So I think that was a good outcome. They're going to think about it. And we used to have a liaison, I think at least 5 years ago we did. But now and nobody really knows what happened. So that may be coming back. Secondly, there was quite a bit of discussion about how the PTC sends a liaison there, and at least one other commission, utilities, also has the same sort of arrangement where that commission, like us, sends a liaison to the city council who often doesn't get called on. And so I again reiterated that it would be potentially highly valuable to city council to call on the liaison just for a quick summary, because that way we can capture some of the nuance of our discussion. And in general, that was a topic of discussion in terms of the communication between the various boards and commissions with the city council, where there was a lot of discussion from the other boards and commissions about how to make that better as well. And so at least the mayor and vice mayor are well aware of the fact that that seems to be a concern among all the boards and commissions. So that's good also. In addition, during the training portion that was given, so this is a new thing where the first hour, I believe, was a training given by both our city attorney's office and the clerk's office to chairs and vice chairs on how to handle various processes as well as hate speech. And that was actually really productive because they gave us little case studies to talk about. And in addition, they suggested some best practices. And one of the best practices was to make sure that when we make a motion, to restate it before we vote on it, and potentially also have staff type it up and put it on screen. So that's very much in line with where we've been trying to move as a commission too. And that was stated as the best practice. So I think that we're going to be moving more in that direction. Is that correct, Assistant Director Armour?
It's something that could be done. I know that the clerks do support many of those other commissions, so it's a little bit different here. But as you have seen, there have been some cases where we have been able to share that wording if we needed clarification. And as you heard this evening, I do make an effort to be able to help with restating the motion as well when that is helpful.
And then there's one more thing very related to that point, where when we then went on to discussion with the mayor and the vice mayor, there were a number of questions, like I said, from the other boards and commissions, as well as from myself, about how do we communicate some of our discussion, because the mayor and vice mayor both said that it's very unlikely that they go back through and read the minutes. And when the idea was brought up about including a little bit more in our motions, they actually said, as two members of city council, that they would welcome that. And so I think there's been some back and forth of discussion here at the PTC about whether we should be doing that or not. And it sounds like they would like it. So that's just something for us to think about. I don't think we want to lengthen our meetings by a whole bunch by wordsmithing all of that, but it is of value to them. So, all right.
So just to tag on to the idea of written version of the motion, as we make it to follow that best practice, I think we should appoint Vice Chair G in absentia to come up with an AI method to do that. I mean, part of the issue we're having is a practical matter here. Part of the issue we're having is we don't have the same staffing that some of those other groups do to have another person who can do that because the staff we have, they're busy. But I had a doctor's appointment yesterday and he just set his recorder on, right? And that generates, it gets summarized and spits out words. And I bet Vice Chair G can figure out how, when it's time to make a motion, he does X, Y, or Z, and it shows up on our screen.
I will pass that on to him.
If I may add as well, I think we actually have seen from Vice Chair G in the last few meetings that he has provided draft language for a motion. And when we have that to work from, then that does make it much simpler for staff to share that on the screen to support your efforts. I also was in attendance in this meeting and was very pleased to hear from the vice chair recognition. They said, well, yeah, sometimes we don't in the staff report have much of a summary, except Planning and Transportation Commission. So it was great to hear recognition that the efforts that we all are together working towards, that we have been providing.
Yes, thank you very much for all of your work summarizing our discussion, Assistant Director Armour. You've done a really good job with that. And council has noticed. All right, so anything else for that? Is that it for our agenda tonight? Oh, now we are on to virtual public comment. Mr. Javert, are any hands raised virtually?
There are not. If there's any members of the public that like to speak virtually, you may now raise your hand. There are not.
And with that, we are adjourned.